I have with me David Tafuri. David Tafuri is a former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor and former State Department official. He knows a little bit about this stuff. David, thank you for being on the conversation. How are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
Okay, man, let me get right into it. First of all, Donald Trump came in, he messed a lot of stuff up. The Abraham Accords, a complete and utter failure. It was a nice idea, but it was really meant, the aim of it was still to oust the Palestinians. It didn't work as planned, and I think it made things quite worse. Why do you think the administration, the current administration, has been so non-effective given this first huge international test of President Joe Biden?
Let me address the Abraham Accords because you raised them. I supported the Abraham Accords. I think they were a positive achievement by the US, and it was positive for Israel and it was positive for the Arab countries that normalized relations with Israel as a result of the Abraham Accords. But what it didn't do, which the Trump administration claimed it would do, was resolve the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, because it really didn't give anything to the Palestinians. And you might argue it actually further isolated the Palestinians, making them even more willing to engage in violence. Now, with respect to Biden's response, remember, we are really early in the Biden administration. Many people who will be key officials in the State Department on Middle East policy are not even confirmed yet, or not even in place yet. In many places across the Middle East, not just in Israel and Palestine, the policy of the Biden administration has not yet been fully formulated. So I don't think that we should judge the Biden administration with respect to what's happened so far. And this, of course, caught everyone off guard. We always know there's a possibility for violence, but this violence erupted out of a result of this tit for tat between Palestinians and Jews in Jerusalem.
David, I got to say this, man. All right, so I disagree with you on that. I do think you can judge the administration based on their public responses. That doesn't mean that's actually the policy that will stick moving forward once you start having some of the more long-term diplomatic entities in place. I get that part. But let's be clear, he's currently the president of the United States. He has currently issued a statement, and you know this from working with President Barack Obama, because he said this at one point when he was criticized for not being friendly enough to Netanyahu. He said, in order to effectively negotiate, you must have room between you and both of the parties involved. If you walk into the room and you're connected to one party and disconnected from the other party, you will not be an effective negotiator. Your former boss said that, and I think he was correct. What do you say to Biden seemingly being more friendly to Netanyahu, even though it is clear that Netanyahu is the villain in this story?
Well, I agree with President Obama on that point fully, and I think you're absolutely right about that. But all previous Democratic and Republican presidents, other than Trump, really maintained that balance pretty well. It was Trump that really tipped the balance completely in favor of Israel. And in order to get a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians, both sides are gonna have to give up a lot. Neither side is gonna be happy if there is a deal. And what Trump tried to do was do everything to make Israel happy and do nothing to try and give something to the Palestinians in return. And that's why the Trump administration was such a huge setback for the Palestinian-Israel peace process. And Biden and the Biden administration are now trying to reset that. But it's gonna take a lot of time to wind back some of what Trump did. And it is important for the Biden administration to maintain a strong relationship with Israel. They are a very important ally in the Middle East. And while we have equities at stake in the Israel-Palestinian dispute, we also have equities at stake in other places in the Middle East. And we need Israel on our side for those other places as well. So this is a delicate balancing act. Really, I blame President Trump and the Trump administration for promising they'd have peace between Israel and the Palestinians and doing nothing to actually achieve it.
I gotta jump back to the Abraham Accords just for a moment. Because David, this is what you do. Man, you're a policy guy, and I respect your work, and I'm glad that you joined me on the show. When the Abraham Accords was signed, did you really believe that it would actually help the relationship between Yemen, Syria, Libya, the West Bank, Gaza Strip? Did you really believe that? Or did you think the Trump administration that they were really selling a ticket that really could not be purchased?
What I thought was that the Trump administration achieved something positive with respect to Israel-Arab relations. And remember, it really started with Israel and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates.
And just for further clarity, the entire concept of the Abraham Accords was to look at the prophet Abraham as a point of contact in Judaism and Islamic religion, faith. Just a point of clarity. Go ahead.
Right, an important figure for both religions.
Correct.
So what it did is it actually got two strong allies of the US, the UAE and Israel, together and got them to normalize relations. And remember, there wasn't a positive thing, which is in return, UAE got Israel to agree not to do, an annex of almost 1/3 of the territory in the West Bank, which Israel was looking like it might do. It was not clear it was gonna do that. And so that was a positive. And then when it had normalized relations with the other countries, that was positive. But they didn't really give anything else to the Palestinians to bring the Palestinians on board. It just helped Israel-Arab relations, not Israel-Palestinian relations.
Agreed. What we got? 4 million Palestinians, Israel-controlled territory. That's about right?
Correct.
Let's talk about the political reality of Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the longest serving prime minister in the history of Israel. He was unable, September 19th of 2019, he was unable to win a convincing majority for the constitutional mandate to govern. So he basically has a broken government, a negotiated government through the parliamentary rules. So now you have a guy fractured. He's even more fractured because just a few days ago, this cat missed his deadline to create a consolidated government or a new government. So now he's even more weak today than he was when he basically lost the election. Does this play, in your opinion, as an actual international policy expert, does his political woes play into what's happening right now in the aggression that we see from Israel?
Well, I think you have to say yes, it's playing a part in it. He obviously is a beleaguered prime minister. He's been in the center of controversy for a long time now. He has become more beholden than he was before to right-wing extremists in Israel, some of whom have engaged in disgusting violence, and there's violence on both sides by radicals on both sides. But Netanyahu used to be tougher on the right-wing extremists, and now he's more beholden to them, I think, because of the political situation. I really am looking for the US to put pressure on Netanyahu and on the Palestinians. We need a temporary ceasefire, but then we need a more long-term peace process. And that's going to require Israel to do some things it hasn't done before, like back off on some of the settlements, halt any further settlements in the West Bank, prosecute and investigate right-wing extremists in Israel, Jews who have engaged in violence. And of course, the Palestinians have to give up a lot too. We have to get Hamas, to back off, no more rockets out of the Gaza Strip. Israel does have the right to defend itself when rockets are fired from the Gaza Strip. And ultimately, if that doesn't stop, Israel is going to engage in further military action towards Gaza.
I've abandoned the idea that somehow this can be a one-state solution. Have you abandoned that idea? Do you believe the only way forward is a two-state bona fide solution?
I do. I've felt for a long time that we have to have a two-state solution. Remember, we were pretty close during the Clinton administration. We didn't quite achieve it. I do believe it's achievable, and it's probably only going to happen when we have a really strong US president who knocks some heads together and who takes risks himself. Because here, this is a very controversial issue, and he's not going to please anyone here either, or he's going to have a lot of people who are going to criticize what he does. We need strong leadership, and hopefully Biden can provide that.
Twitter has become a place of what we call de facto policy. While presidents don't create policy on Twitter, they definitely let you know what policy they will and will not support via their Twitter tweet, right? So if you were advising Joe Biden right now, President Biden, what would you tell him about his Twitter?
Oh, well, I don't think he should be using Twitter to announce policy. I mean, you can't describe a policy, especially something as complicated as Israel-Palestinian, peace process in 240 characters. That's impossible.
Right, but would you advise him to do what he did, which was take such a neutral response that it has created significant backlash by members of his own party and obviously others because of their stance, their policy stance in relationship to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Would you agree, or did you agree with the tweet that he sent out?
I don't think he should be using Twitter to engage in any controversial policy. It's not the right way. He's a good speaker. He should be using speeches and oratory and writing and press statements, not Twitter. We learned to accept that under Trump. It's not acceptable for a president.
Yeah. Well, I hope he starts doing some of what you just named as well. I would be happy to just, hear a good speech that stands up for right, okay? David, you're a very accomplished person. I have a lot of respect for you, man. I appreciate you coming on the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.